Well, hey guys, today we are going to be talking about eczema and diet. What is the role of diet in eczema? Are there any foods that you should eat or avoid in order to help manage your eczema? If you weren't aware, it's October and it's Eczema Awareness Month. I've been doing a lot of videos this month all about eczema. And when we talk about eczema, it's actually just an umbrella term for 7 different skin conditions. But the skin condition that most people think of when they think of eczema is atopic dermatitis. This is a skin condition that commonly affects young children, but actually affects anyone at any age. And it's characterized by a problem with the skin's moisture barrier. In other words, the skin of people who have atopic dermatitis is prone to losing water and for irritating things getting into the skin. What is the root cause of atopic dermatitis? There's not really one sole root cause, but rather there are a few factors that work together to lead to this condition. That includes your genetics. Something about an individual's immune system with atopic dermatitis is skewed more on the side of readily developing allergies to certain things, and we'll get into that in a moment because it includes food. And patients who have atopic dermatitis, they have problems with the structure of the topmost outer protective layer of their skin, and that is what allows things to get in, to aggravate that immune response, to lead to these rashes. So it's complex, it's not just one root cause. Because of these underlying factors, people with atopic dermatitis are predisposed to developing food allergies, especially in young children. They're also predisposed to having asthma and allergic rhinitis, aka seasonal allergies. Not everyone with atopic dermatitis will have all of these. Some people with atopic dermatitis maybe have one, outgrow one feature, and continue to have others. For young kids, for example, typically follows a pattern of presentation which is referred to as the atopic march. In other words, they develop the eczema in very early childhood, then shortly thereafter, maybe they develop food allergies. Then when they get a little bit older, maybe they have asthma, and then when they get a little bit older, they have seasonal allergies. It's called the atopic march because that is really when these things start to appear. So this video is all about diet, and you can't talk about atopic dermatitis without talking about food allergies. About 40% of kids and babies with moderate to severe atopic dermatitis will have food allergies. So when someone has a food allergy, it can lead to gastrointestinal upset when they ingest the food. It can also cause different types of skin problems outside of atopic dermatitis, hives in particular. It can cause lip swelling. These food allergies can be very severe, and you can develop shortness of breath, wheezing, and the thing we really worry about that's life-threatening is anaphylaxis with severe food allergies. So obviously with food allergies, if you're allergic to a food, you need to avoid it and discuss with your child's pediatrician about their diet, and you may need to work with a specialist if the child does have a confirmed food allergy. These types of food allergies, they are mediated by something called IgE. That's part of your immune system way of being allergic to something. It makes something called IgE. But here's the thing, a child who has food allergies, they avoid that food, good, it's important to do that, but it doesn't really have any bearing on the severity or the course of their eczema. It's actually very rare for foods to exacerbate atopic dermatitis. It's common for people with atopic dermatitis to have food allergies, and those food allergies need to be addressed. But addressing the food allergy doesn't really do much in the vast majority of cases for the atopic dermatitis. There's only a rare subset of patients with atopic dermatitis whose skin problem, whose atopic dermatitis is aggravated by foods. Food exacerbated atopic dermatitis. This is something that we would consider, it's a very small subset of people. And we would consider it in somebody who has moderate to severe atopic dermatitis that is not responding to typical treatments like topical steroids. And of course, there will also be a corroborating history. Like, for example, mom might say, every time my child eats eggs, their eczema just flares up. They get super itchy. They have weeping, behind their knees, and their elbows, on their face. So that coupled with the fact that typical eczema treatments are not working, that together builds a story for maybe we should consider food-exacerbated atopic dermatitis. For adults who have atopic dermatitis, food allergies are even less of a driving thing. Food allergies are something that happens for young kids, and a lot of times they actually outgrow the food allergy. Now, with adults who have new onset, first time ever atopic dermatitis, food allergies are almost never playing a role at this point. So should you avoid any foods if you have atopic dermatitis? For the vast majority of people, including children, avoiding foods is not helpful for the eczema. And in the case of children, elimination diets can be very, very harmful to their well-being, to their development, to their growth. You know, having a child who has atopic dermatitis, it is not only distressing for the child, but it's very distressing for the caretaker, for the family. And, you know, you want to do everything possible to help your child. They're scratching, they're itchy, and a lot of parents, caregivers of children with atopic dermatitis will go about of their own accord, not doctor recommended, trying to eliminate foods from the child's diet in the hopes of helping their eczema. And in a lot of cases, it actually can go quite wrong and can lead to more harm than good. For example, eliminating 3 or more foods from a child's diet outside of doctor supervision, outside of the care of a registered dietitian, monitoring and modifying the diet accordingly to make sure the child's needs are being met. It really can lead to growth problems, malnutrition, as well as vitamin mineral deficiency. Studies have looked at kids whose parents put them on an elimination diet for their atopic dermatitis and by definition had eliminated 3 or more foods. The children ended up becoming deficient in B12, riboflavin, phosphorus. The other harmful thing with children whose immune systems are developing and things, the other harm that can come if you go about trying to eliminate foods in their diet without a true medical reason, they actually are more likely to then develop allergies. Getting your body exposed to things early on actually makes it less likely that you become allergic. It's similar to if you've ever heard of the hygiene hypothesis, where if you like a boy in a bubble who is protected from all sorts of things ends up becoming hyper allergic to everything because their immune system does not become aware and familiar of innocuous things. The same thing can happen in young children who are not exposed to certain foods that, out of fear that they may become allergic. And in fact, you end up making the child more likely to become allergic to said food or food group by just eliminating it. Allergy testing provides information, but the information is only helpful provided that it is clinically relevant. So you can go getting allergy tests and you'll probably test positive to a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is clinically relevant to you. So if you or your child are eating foods and you're not having reactions, like you eat the food and you break out in hives, or your lips swell, you develop shortness of breath, frank anaphylaxis, there is no actual indication for food allergy testing. One of the problems with food allergy testing is that false positives are very, very common. This is why if you don't have the history of developing hives and wheezing, shortness of breath, a true reaction upon eating these foods, there's no reason to go testing for it because there's a high likelihood that you will test positive, but it is a false positive, meaning it's not clinically relevant. That can cause a lot of distress for people, and they end up thinking, well, I'm going to try and avoid this anyway. Again, that can lead you down a path of developing food allergies, true food allergies, or nutrient deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies, and in the case of children, problems with growth. Nowadays, you have a boom of these direct-to-consumer lab tests. I mean, you can buy a lab test for yourself for a ton of stuff. And it's actually very problematic for many reasons. People think, well, the more information, the better. And that's not necessarily true, because what are you going to do with that information? How are you going to interpret that information? Lab tests only show you a snapshot of what is going on in any particular window of time. They don't necessarily prove that you have a problem with whatever you are testing for. Even if it's positive, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is relevant or something that you need to worry about. But once you test for it and you find out it's positive, then it becomes a thing where, well, you're kind of obligated to figure out if it's a problem, and it leads you down a path of over testing. Same thing with food allergies. A lot of people will go and they'll find these direct to consumer food allergy tests, which are so flawed because these tests, they don't actually end up in the majority of cases testing for even relevant allergies. They test for IgG instead of IgE. And IgG is something else that your immune system makes. And you're going to test positive for IgG. It doesn't mean you have an allergy. It just means that your body has seen that allergen. It's IgE that's the antibody that is relevant to allergies in some, provided there's a history there of allergic symptoms. And here's the thing with atopic dermatitis, patients who have atopic dermatitis, they have higher than normal IgE levels because their immune system is skewed towards an allergy state. But that makes somebody more on the allergic side. That's why as the March goes on, a lot of people end up developing things like asthma, seasonal allergies, because the immune system is in a state of, being more prone to taking an allergic angle, okay? Not to get political on you guys, but you could think of your immune system as kind of like two political parties. Oh gosh, here we go. Please don't cancel me. And there's going to be, you have a Th1 candidate and you have a Th2 candidate. And there can be extremists at either end. And when you have atopic dermatitis, you're kind of more on, leaning towards one candidate. And so your immune system is going to act in a certain pattern more likely, okay? Similar to how people are with their political leanings, okay? Now, a lot of people confuse food allergies with food intolerances. And it's very different. With the food intolerance, it's not something that your immune system is involved in. So should you avoid foods you are intolerant to? Absolutely. Probably one of the most common food intolerances is lactose. But you can be intolerant to other foods. Typically, a food intolerance is going to lead to gastrointestinal symptoms, diarrhea. If you're lactose intolerant, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't make enough of the enzyme to break down lactose. It causes gastrointestinal upset. That's not a food allergy, it's an intolerance. Other people feel as though they are intolerant to other things like gluten or wheat. And they feel better when they avoid those things or when they consume those things. They have upset stomach. So if you're intolerant to a food and it produces gastrointestinal symptoms for you, of course, avoiding that. And in the vast majority of cases, you can avoid milk and be perfectly fine. Even nowadays, people feel as though they want to try avoiding gluten. They have an intolerance to it. They don't feel well when they consume it. And nowadays, that is something that is a lot more doable. We have a lot more options for gluten-free foods, and eating whole foods typically leans towards being gluten-free. So that's something that patients often will initiate on their own, and provided that they're doing it and provided that they're not overly restricting their diet. And generally speaking, if they do it of their own accord, they feel great doing it, they feel better, they feel like their eczema is getting better, their doctor is not going to be bothered by that. But where it becomes concerning is when people start, trying to eliminate a lot of different foods and food groups, food categories in the effort to clear their skin. And, that really can put you down the path to malnutrition. And frankly, avoiding foods, I have to emphasize this to you guys, in the vast majority of cases, it doesn't truly impact the eczema. The thing about eczema, atopic dermatitis, is that it's a chronic skin condition and it can clear up. It can clear up, get better, burn out. And it also can come back at a later time point. One of the mainstays of controlling eczema, atopic dermatitis, is avoiding triggers: wool, overbathing, dry air, sweat on the skin surface. These are triggers for atopic dermatitis. Stress, poor sleep. Stress and poor sleep lead to a flare of atopic dermatitis, and then guess what? You're itchy, you don't sleep as well because you're scratching, you get more stress, and it builds on itself. Are there any foods that you should eat if you have atopic dermatitis? Short answer is there's not a food that we can point to and be like, this is healing for atopic dermatitis. Generally speaking, we advise patients to try as best they're able to avoid processed, refined foods constituting the bulk of their diet. If you eat a bag of chips, go to McDonald's one day, you're not going to have the worst eczema of your life. In moderation, junk food is acceptable, but it should not constitute the bulk of anyone's diet, regardless of atopic dermatitis. Ultra-processed foods, fast food, junk food, the stuff we know that is not the best for us. If that constitutes the bulk of your diet, it becomes very inflammatory. It's very taxing on your health. You actually can run into nutrient deficiencies eating that way. And, that of course is not going to be good for anyone's skin. And in the case of atopic dermatitis, anything that is inflammatory definitely can aggravate the symptoms of atopic dermatitis and lead to flares of the skin condition. But there's simply no research to support like eliminating any food. If you have atopic dermatitis, your doctor is not going to just say, I think you should cut out gluten. Your doctor should, what is the reason for that? The main reasons to cut out gluten are if you have celiac disease, you have gluten-sensitive enteropathy, or you have a condition called dermatitis herpetiformis. Those are conditions where you absolutely have to avoid gluten. Then some people find that they don't get along well with gluten-rich foods. They're intolerant to it. It makes them feel unwell. They don't feel great, and they feel better when they avoid it. In that case, fine. That is your choice. But to just go recommending people cut out gluten, it is not an evidence-based recommendation. The last thing I want to talk about with you guys is a nickel-free diet. Now, I've done some videos this month about nickel and eczema. Nickel is a really, really common contact allergen, not the same as a food allergy. It's another way in which your immune system can, make your life miserable. It's another type of allergy. It's called a delayed type hypersensitivity. Nickel allergy, basically you're going to develop rash where nickel comes in contact with the skin. It's called an allergic contact dermatitis. Regardless of having atopic dermatitis, allergy to nickel is very common. And it's an allergy where you come in contact with nickel and it leads to a rash. And if you have atopic dermatitis, that will then flare the atopic dermatitis. And you have to, avoid things with nickel coming in contact with the skin. But nickel is very ubiquitous in our food supplies. Many foods have a lot of nickel. It's abundant in our soil, air. We're breathing it in. So you're getting a lot of it in the diet. But in the vast majority of cases, being allergic to nickel in the form of contact dermatitis does not equate to having a problem ingesting it. It's merely when it comes in contact with the skin. So should you go avoiding nickel in your diet? It's very hard to. What about a low nickel diet? A low nickel diet is beneficial in a minority subset of patients. Only under certain circumstances would we really consider recommending a low nickel diet. And that includes a rare presentation of contact dermatitis. It's called systemic allergic contact dermatitis. This is pretty rare, but it does happen. I've seen cases of it for sure, but it's not common. It's an allergic contact dermatitis where not only is it a problem when it comes in contact with your skin, but then your body starts to really react whenever you ingest a lot of it. And it presents in a very characteristic way. Basically, you get a rip-roaring eczema on the eyelids, but in particular in the anogenital area and around the buttocks. And it's actually called baboon syndrome because you get such a bad rash on your rear end, it turns red, so like a baboon. Not the nicest way to describe a rash, but yeah, that is not common. So unless you have that, going on a low nickel diet is not likely to be helpful to you. Then some people who have a type of hand eczema called dyshidrotic hand eczema. I have videos on this, by the way. They are very, a lot of times their hand eczema is very triggered by nickel. Touching nickel aggravates the hand eczema. And a subset of those people find that if they go on a low nickel diet, they have fewer flares. Doesn't cure the nickel, it doesn't cure the eczema for them, but a subset of them do find that they have fewer flares. But I got to tell you guys, going on a low nickel diet is no walk in the park because, like I said, it's very commonly found in our food supply. It's hard to avoid. Nickel is very high in canned foods, especially canned acidic foods. Tomatoes, especially tomato sauces, pizza sauce, Any kind of canned tomato-based product, high in nickel. Beans are also high in nickel. Beans, soybeans, peas, and split peas. Dried fruits are high in nickel. Strong licorice and almonds. Meats are not so high in nickel. The one animal-based food that is pretty high in nickel is gelatin. And cocoa and chocolate are also high in nickel. Fortunately, coffee is not. But you know, a lot of things actually can influence the nickel content of food, where it's grown, how it's harvested, the conditions of the soil, and how it's processed. So going on a low nickel diet is not really something that you should just do for fun or to try out, because it can easily lead to a very restrictive diet that puts you at risk for vitamin and mineral and nutrient deficiencies. It's only really a small subset of people for which a low nickel diet is going to be indicated. There are some things though that you can eliminate or modify that don't really involve you changing your diet much at all, that will reduce your exposure to nickel. One is just check your utensils that you eat with. A lot of times they may contain nickel, like your forks, your knives, the things that you are cooking with. And in my video all about, nickel as a trigger to avoid if you have eczema, a contact trigger, I talked about the dimethylglyoxime test. You can rub on things and it'll tell you if there's nickel in them. You know, if you're getting a lot of eczema on the face, around your mouth, it could be actually the utensils that you're eating with, maybe triggering that if you're allergic to nickel. So replace nickel-plated utensils. Don't cook acidic foods in stainless steel. Acidic foods will leach more nickel out and intensify the nickel content in your food. Don't drink canned sodas, seltzer waters, because the nickel in the can can get leached into the soda, especially like colas and things that are acidic. Try and stay away from canned foods too. That would be another modification. You can replace canned foods with fresh cooked foods, less likely to have a high nickel content. If that's something that you're able to try. Another little small tweak that you can do is if you drink tap water, first thing in the morning when you wake up in the morning, if you're used to going to the kitchen and getting a glass of water, make sure you let the water run a little bit before drinking, because at night nickel can come out from the pipes and concentrate a bit in that first outpouring of water. So let it flow a little bit before you drink out of the tap. Certain things will impact how much nickel your body absorbs too. For example, vitamin C, orange juice, milk, tea, and coffee actually inhibit the absorption of nickel. So that is another thing, maybe incorporate those beverages to your liking. Situations where you will get more nickel absorption include iron deficiency. Recently I did a video about the skin signs of iron deficiency anemia. Check that out. But having iron deficiency leads to anemia, but it also increases your absorption of nickel, because when you are iron deficient, your body puts out an increased amount of metal transporters, and that brings in more nickel. So, iron deficiency can be the result of a variety of things. We're not going to get into that. That is a hematology discussion above and beyond the scope of today's video. But iron deficiency is the most common nutrient deficiency worldwide, and when you are iron deficient, you are going to be absorbing more nickel. So something to understand there. Women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, they have a higher iron demand because they're growing a child and they're making food for a child who is growing. So high iron demand, their body puts out more of those metal transporters, they absorb more nickel. So if you're a lot of women develop eczema actually in pregnancy, or a flaring of eczema in pregnancy or postpartum. And, that is a time actually where you are absorbing more nickel. And I would not, suggest going on a low nickel diet in those situations without, doctor supervision. But, if you think it's playing a role, take a look at your utensils and take a look at how you're preparing food. It may help cut down. But, I want to emphasize that the low nickel diet, outside of that rare subset of people who develop baboon syndrome, systemic contact dermatitis, it's rarely that helpful. And, it may cut down on recurrences, but it's not going to cure the atopic dermatitis. So it's a lot of work for very little return in many cases. And if anything, if you go too far with it, you can put yourself at risk for nutrient deficiencies. All right, guys, I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have atopic dermatitis. On the end slide, I'm going to put my recent video all about eczema trigger to avoid, where we talk all about nickel. So check that one out next. But if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.